Welcome to a special presentation of the Charles Bookwalter Digital Town Hall. Vote Charles Bookwalter May 7th. What does Chip Roy think about Jim Baird's yes vote for Biden's $1.2 trillion spending bill?
Any Republican who votes for this bill should be ashamed of themselves.
Jim Baird should be ashamed, and we should be disgusted.
This budget funds full-term abortion. It funds DEI. It funds trans ideology on our youth as young as 12 years old.
But at least Baird voted to protect the border, right?
If you care about the border, you're getting nothing here.
On May 7th, vote no to big government Jim Baird.
I'm Charles Bookwalter, and I approve this message.
For the first time in 6 years, Indiana's 4th has a choice in who we send to Washington, D.C. And Charles Bookwalter is the constitutional conservative we need now more than ever. Charles Bookwalter is a former Green Beret and Bronze Star recipient who wants to close the border, rein in the out-of-control spending on both sides of the aisle, and get America back on track. If you're sick and tired of the status quo, you have a choice this primary. Make your voice heard. Vote Charles Bookwalter on May 7th.
I'm Charles Bookwalter, and I approve this message.
We now return you to a special presentation of the Charles Bookwalter Digital Town Hall.
Hey everyone, Charles Bookwalter here. As many of you know, I'm running to represent you in Indiana's 4th Congressional District. One of the reasons I'm running, because like many of you, I feel like we are over-legislated and underrepresented. And there's no better example of this underrepresentation than what I experienced this past weekend, and I'd like to share it with you. This happened in Carroll County last weekend, where a local group a number of months ago tried to set up a debate between Congressman Jim Baird and myself. This is the third debate that I've done, but unfortunately Congressman Baird didn't show up for any of them. What you'll see is that during this debate, I took some very difficult and unscripted questions. The following evening was in Carroll County was the Lincoln Day dinner. The Lincoln Day dinner showed what a significant contrast it was between the Saturday night town hall and the Lincoln Day dinner, where Congressman Baird was provided an opportunity and a platform to use it as a campaign speech. And now, if you remember, or if you may not know, inside politics is that Bo Baird, Indiana assemblyman who took over for his father's seat when Jim Baird went into the U.S. Congress, is also Congressman Baird's campaign manager. And the Carroll County GOP allowed Congressman Baird and his campaign manager to use the Lincoln Day dinner as a platform to do what they called a fireside chat. But in reality, and what you'll see by viewing this side-by-side comparison, is what it was is a series of scripted questions. Now, you have the opportunity right now to see a side-by-side between a candidate like myself that believes in transparency and openness and will ask or answer any question that you may have, and a candidate that this is the only time in this entire election cycle that you will see a Q&A being done. And the Q&A is done by his son, who is also his campaign manager. So we've provided you this distinct comparison, a side-by-side. You're doing a town hall meeting the night before and a campaign stop by Congressman Jim Baird. Please take the time to watch it, and then you'll have a better understanding of who you would like to represent you in Indiana's 4th Congressional District, and you'll have a better idea of who to vote for in the primary on May 7th. Thanks for viewing.
It's an opportunity to be here. And I'm going to do this a little different. I thought we might have some fun, make it a little more interesting. So I'm going to have my son go come up, and we're going to do what I call, or he calls, a fireside chat. So I hope we can touch the things that are important to you. And, you know, I just want to tell you before we start how much I enjoy people like you and the opportunity to visit with people like you at the end of the big farm community this time of the year when the crops are getting ready to put out. And so it really means a lot to me to be in this environment at this time of year. And all the people I deal with in Washington, D.C., you can't believe how much I really mean that, because there's a lot of those folks I don't even understand, Todd. I don't even know what they're thinking, or where they're coming from. But nonetheless, we've got a few remarks we'll make, and let's move this microphone right over the top, and we can do that.
Sir.
Is this working?
Yeah.
As he said, I am Bo Baird, and I'll be moderating tonight's fireside chat. Dad, I think last time we did this was for state party, is that right? You and Congressman Mass and Congressman Crenshaw at the time.
That's right.
We'll try to keep this more brief than we did that. I know you've been coming here for over a decade. When you combine your time as a congressman and as a candidate, I do see a few new faces in the crowd. Can you give us a brief, very high level, a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. Grew up on a farm, went to Purdue, a BS and a master's degree, went to Vietnam, came home a decorated Vietnam combat veteran. Then I was at the University of Kentucky for a PhD. And then we came home. My wife is a nurse, and she's probably the reason I'm still here. Anyway, yeah, that's right. Anyway, we started buying farm ground because we were both interested in that, and started a home health care agency. And that's been what we've been doing since we got back to Vietnam. And so all those experiences have really added to my appreciation for what we do, and my appreciation for agriculture, my appreciation for family, and this country is so.
I think also before you started public service, you were involved in a lot of community organizations. President of the local fair board, you run Rotary, the local cattlemen's association. Can you tell me a little bit about how those experiences have transcended into your work at the State House and then in the U.S. Congress?
Well, thank you both for that. I mean, did serve in a lot of the civic clubs around Putnam County there. But, I want you to know that two of the groups that I really enjoyed was the FFA and the 4-H. And I really support those kids and those programs because it gives those young people a real opportunity to get to know how they can perform impromptu speeches and to be able to talk standing on their feet. And so I really support those two programs. And so I was president of the county fair, Putnam County Fair, a couple of years. And I can't tell you how much I enjoyed, if you really needed somebody at the county fair, well, most folks would think you need to go and try to find them. But I'm telling you, if you just sat on a bale of straw or sat on a bench at the end of one of the barns, everybody will walk past sooner or later. So it's a good time to visit with the community. And what's really also good about that, in addition to the kids in 4-H being able to compete, it's the culmination of their year's worth of work, getting an animal ready, getting a project ready, and so then they can get together and exhibit those exhibits at the county fair. And so they have a real opportunity to get to know each other. But the adults have the opportunity to really share community values even at the same time.
You're watching a special presentation of the Charles Bookwalter Digital Town Hall. Our program will return after this message. Jim Baird recently claimed the Bookwalter for Congress grassroots campaign to unseat Baird is a political weapon of the swamp and that Charles Bookwalter is a rhino. Really? Well, let's just see who really owns who. On the left are the top donors of the Jim Baird campaign. On the right, we have the top donors of the Bookwalter campaign. What do you notice? Baird is right. Charles Bookwalter is owned by the people of the 4th District. And who owns Jim Baird? The swamp. The swamp owns Jim Baird.
I'm Charles Bookwalter, and I approve this message.
We now return you to a special presentation of the Charles Bookwalter Digital Town Hall.
So, Congressman, when you were first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, you came into the minority, and I know that was a big difference from when you served at the State House in a supermajority. We still do a family dinner every Sunday night, and as we talk around the dinner table, We like to share the dichotomy between our roles, my role at the State House and his role in D.C. Can you talk to the audience a little bit about what it was like coming into the minority and what your focus was when you first came into the minority?
Not good. I mean, really not good. And when I first went to Congress, after the first 35 days or so, I didn't think there was any hope for this country to try to save it. But after I was there a while, we started getting into committees and so on. Then it became more apparent, I guess, of how important it was for people like me that really grew up in a community like this to make sure that I get your values at the legislative table and that we have representation there that can express that and make sure that they understand what you feel here in this part of the country. So after I did that, then I decided that I was going to stay just because the country needs it. And I love this country. So I'm going to protect those things that are important to our children and our grandchildren.
I saw on one of your outreach flyers that you returned almost $5 million of hardware and Hoosier dollars to constituents in the 4th District. I think casework is something that always gets overlooked as we talk to you about legislation. Is that something you can talk to us about tonight, what your office has done casework-wise, and maybe explain what that $5 million is?
Where did you get these questions anyway? You're right. That was one of the things I found interesting, that our own government, I'm surprised how many people cannot get results from whatever agency it is. I don't care if it's the IRS or the Veterans Administration or some of those others. And so we have returned $5 million because we've helped people with constituent services, and we've been pretty good about that, both at the federal level and here in the district. And that is really rewarding when you see a veteran get what they think they deserve, and when justifiably, or if you settle an IRS problem that's been going on for 2 or 3 or 4 years, it really is a rewarding experience. And our staff does a great job of that, and they appreciate that kind of experience.
Turning our focus to current events, the goal. What are you hearing? What are you seeing as priorities as you travel across?
I had the opportunity to go with the painting to some of the other places around the country. But when you get to people like you, I think the 3 things, I can nail down to 3 things, but a lot of things I can talk about and tell you the background of. But it really comes down to the border, inflation, and then what we had just last week on the FISA reauthorization. And so when you look at those 3 items, and there's no question that I think the board needs to vote. And what's really frustrating is we don't need more laws to do that. I think the president and this administration, the president, could take an executive order and handle that right now. So we're constantly encouraging them to make sure they do that. What I'm afraid of is that it's going to take change. It's going to change administration before we can get that done. It is really frustrating to see the number of people coming across our border. And when we went down there about 4 years or so ago, and the Border Patrol folks shared with us that were there, and they were almost overwhelmed at that time. But here recently, I went back in the last year, and the thing that struck me was that the Border Patrol agents were talking about tentacles that come across from those cartels. They run Mexico, and then they have representatives right in our own country that have come across this open borders. So they can be in these cities, these safe areas for them, And that's not good for the country. And it's overwhelming our healthcare system. It's overwhelming our schools. And they even taken some of these schools to house these individuals. And so all of that has contributed to our problem with crime and so on around these sanctuary cities. So that's the first issue I think we need to take care of. And we could relate to other things that also relate to that. We could get into the sex trafficking and those kind of things that happen as a result of those individuals coming across the border. The last I knew, there was 100,000 children that had come across the border, and we don't know where they're at. You can't find them. And so what are we going to do with those young children, and where are they at, and how are they being taken care of? So, so the border is an important one. Have I got time to go on about
Yep.
I mentioned inflation. That's the second issue that we have. The cost of goods and services is skyrocketed now, like 30% increase or so in many of those things that we buy. I use the example that my pickup truck, to fill it up 2 or 3 years ago, cost $45, and now it costs me over $100. And so that demonstrates in one way inflation. And every time I fill it up, John, I'm thinking about that $55 and how much that can be used to buy food or food or something else that a family might need, because essentially you got to pick up trucks, so you know how much it costs. Fill that up. So inflation, and what happened is when this administration started out with an executive order that closed the Keystone Pipeline.
No.
That sends shocks to the energy sector of the country. And if you think about energy, we not only to heat the home, turn the lights on and so on, but everything travels either by air or by truck or by barge. And every time you do that, you've got an engine there that's burning fuel, even to deliver the goods to whatever store. When you do that, those costs of fuel, among other things, but anyway, when that cost of fuel goes higher, then that cost is added on to the cost of goods. And in a way, it's like a tax. You end up paying that one way or another because they pass that along. And if you're going to stay in business, you can't afford to eat that cost. And the other thing was the FISA bill that we passed just last week. Where do you go? Federal Intelligence and Organization. It allows the FBI and law enforcement folks, particularly the FBI, to look at your communications and what you do maybe on the internet or electronically and so on. And I was not supportive of that bill. It was up for reauthorization for another 5 years. I was not supportive of that bill because there was an amendment that was offered that you had to get a warrant before you could tap into my electronic communication. And so I wasn't supportive of that for that very reason. Had that amendment been in there, I would have been supportive with that reauthorization.
Thank you, Congressman. Shifting gears a little bit, there's a proliferation of deceitful and insincere misinformation out there about some of your legislation, in particular the carbon sequestration. Is that something you can talk to us about tonight as well?
Absolutely. The carbon sequestration bill was simply, when I looked out here what the state of Indiana was doing, and you were looking into that and some of the bills that you had. But I realized that there was not enough research being done on the second part of carbon sequestration. And I know many of you have probably had a lot of discussions about that in this area. But nonetheless, there was not enough research or enough data about the consequences of storing CO2 for long-term underground, deep underground. What happens if you have a leak, or what happens if you have some kind of an explosion or whatever? But I realized there wasn't enough research. So this bill that came out of the science committee and related to having that kind of research conducted so that local officials and people like you had the opportunity to study that information, and then we would know whether we wanted to put CO2 under the ground in an area close to us or even underground that we own. So there is no eminent domain in that bill whatsoever. It's all about research. And so I don't appreciate this information that many of you have probably had in that regard.
Thank you, Congressman. Did I hear you correctly that you'll be explaining this on the House floor tomorrow? If anybody wants to tune in and see it live, or they can watch the recording?
That's the current plan, yes.
Okay. Congressman, that's all the questions I have for you. Will you stick around and answer individual questions after the conclusion of Lincoln Day?
Absolutely. Will do.
Any closing remarks before we stop?
Well, I really appreciate what you do, and I want you to continue to do what you do, because the thing we need to do now, and the primary's coming up on a week and Tuesday, and so we need to get all your friends and so on out to make sure we go, because we want to be in a position by the time we come around to November to make sure we can change this administration from what we have now. It's important to every one of us. It's important to our children, and it's important to our grandchildren. But I do thank you for being here. I appreciate you letting me come visit with you, and God bless America.
What you just viewed is what it's like to be over-legislated and underrepresented when you're not able to ask questions to your incumbent, or when they have a scripted narrative where they control the line of questioning. And what you'll see by stark contrast the night before in our debate is the local people being able to ask whatever question they wanted about the most important issues of the day. So please stay tuned and watch it. We'll be right back after this.
Why did Jim Baird suddenly flip-flop on his support for Ukraine funding? One day he's for it, the next he's not. For the record, between 2022 and 2023, Jim Baird voted on 3 separate occasions to give a total of $90 billion to the Ukrainian war machine. He even received an A rating for his unwavering support. But now Baird says he's against funding Ukraine. What changed? Charles Bookwalter. Charles Bookwalter is a true constitutional conservative who's ready to serve and vote the will of the people of the Fourth. That's what changed.
I'm Charles Bookwalter, and I approve this message.
Who is Charles Bookwalter? Charles is a husband, father, entrepreneur, and former Green Beret. But most importantly, Charles Bookwalter is a constitutional conservative. Charles Bookwalter will work to close our borders, ensuring the safety and security of our nation. Charles will fight to secure your personal medical freedoms, giving you complete control over your own healthcare decisions. And Charles Bookwalter will continue his fight to secure our elections, ensuring every vote counts. On May 7th, you have a choice.
I'm Charles Bookwalter, and I approve this message.
All right, well, so this is just a touch unorthodox because there's not a moderator because the other party didn't show up. So I'm going to take a few minutes extra that I would typically not take and give a brief biography of who I am. And I'll make it very brief, and then we'll get into a few issues that I would challenge the incumbent on if you were here. And then we can get into some questions maybe about those issues. So obviously my name is Charles Bookwalter. I grew up I'm a lifelong Hoosier. I grew up in Vermilion County, Indiana. That's right on the border of Indiana and Illinois. I live now in Thorntown, Indiana, which is in Boone County, south of Lafayette. I have my wife of 17 years, and I have 3 daughters, 9, 9, and 8. And we 3H at home. We homestead, homeschool, and home church. Now, I've been challenged on the home church part. We do attend church, and we are small group leaders, my wife and I both, in the kids' ministry. So we don't just stay at home and church. We also attend church as well and volunteer there. I graduated from Indiana University and went directly into sales. To graduate Indiana University, I had to do an internship, which took me to the Pentagon, which got my first experience in the military. I realized that I wanted to serve after 9/11. I was at the Pentagon in 99 to 2000, and then 2001 happened. So ultimately, I matriculated into the U.S. Army in 2006 under a contract that allowed me to go directly into the Army Special Forces. So in 3 years, I earned the Green Beret as a medic, and I also learned Chinese. So a year and a half of that training was the medical training and the Chinese. So for the next few years until 2012, I was active duty. So from 2009 to 2012, I was active duty. I did 2 combat deployments, earned a Bronze Star, and went to all kinds of additional schools and trainings. In 2012, my wife and I were out west, and I told her I'd never make the military career, and she wanted to go home, so we came home. As a medic, it's a year-long training. I was able to leverage that training into a job in medical device sales. The last 7 years of which I was at Intuitive Surgical, which is a manufacturer of the Da Vinci robot. So for the last 7 years of my professional career, I was in the operating room training surgeons on how to use the Da Vinci robot and working with administration and the C-suite on how to purchase these Da Vinci robots. That job allowed me the financial opportunity to invest. So we built some commercial real estate just south of here in Clinton County, in Frankfurt. And I bought a Jimmy John's franchise that we put in as the corner store in that in 2017. All right, that's the summary. I tell you all that to tell you that when COVID occurred, I was in the operating room and I owned a fast casual restaurant. It was probably the 2 worst sectors that you could be in at that time. And if in this debate, I might have an opportunity to remind you of some of the things that occurred during that time that we've forgotten already, that had a significant impact on someone like me. So ultimately, I resigned that job at Intuitive because it was requiring the jab, both the hospital and the company. And so the writing was on the wall and I left. But also, I had to go save that business, the Jimmy John's restaurant, because I couldn't get employees to stay there. I was competing with the federal government for money. And here's one of the reminders. If any of you own a small business, I don't know what happened to you, but my employees would leverage COVID against me to get a number of days off, however many they wanted, up to 10 days, by saying things like, you don't want the town of Frankfurt knowing that COVID is running through our restaurant, do you? Now, COVID doesn't scare anyone. But back then, in 2020, everyone was so fearful that that's what they did to us, that it had an impact, even on me thinking to myself, I don't know if I want that rumor getting out. That could really seriously impact our business. But ultimately, the way I handled that business is what got me involved in politics. I did not mask my employees. A lot of them are high school students that wore masks for 8 hours a day or whatever it is in public school. And I didn't rearrange the store. I didn't put the stickers down that said social distancing. I didn't put the chairs up or separate anything. We treated our store like it was 2019 again. And right now that store in Frankfurt is doing very well. I don't have to be there as much because I think the community has rewarded us with our good decision making during that time. When the health department called me and sent me letters telling me how I need to mask my employees and social distance, I told them that I wasn't going to do it. I didn't care how many times they called me. And if anyone wanted to complain or call them to complain about our store, they could just tell them to go to Arnie's or some other restaurant. They didn't have to go to our restaurant. So I tell you all that because I think that as we consider who our primary candidate is or who's going to go to the election, you need to consider how that person handled themselves during that time. That opportunity during that time was an opportunity of a lifetime for our elected officials to be some of the greatest stalwarts of liberty to go down in history. And they failed us. Nearly every single one of them failed us. They did not stand up for us. And that includes Congressman Jim Baird, who did not stand up against the medical tyranny that occurred. In fact, he did not vote to reinstate the airline pilots after they had lost their jobs due to the vaccine mandates. He was one of 80 Republican congressmen that did not vote to reinstate them. He also did not stand up for the military. 11,000 military personnel were got out of the military or were discharged from the military because they refused to take the vaccination. Subsequent to that, there was a group of military officials that are former military and current military that decided to hold the leadership responsible. So they are I can't remember the bill, but I've signed it. Or it's a notice. But again, it's an example that Jim Baird didn't do anything during that time to stand up for military or anyone else during that critical moment. There's another fight that we're fighting right here, probably here in Carroll County, although I haven't been a part of it, is this fight against Joe Biden's green energy policies that are being forced in each one of our counties throughout the district. And I tell you all that because I've gone to a number of these meetings all over, in White County, in Newton County, in Warren County, in Jasper County, Hendricks County, Boone County. I've been to a meeting in almost every single one of those counties, in the planning meetings, the commissioner meetings, or the BZA meetings, speaking up against this, the green energy being pushed on these communities that don't want them. And we've been successful. Just last week I was in Fountain County when we had 200 people showed up because they don't want these solar fields being put in their backyard. And they went in, they showed up, we had a little rally outside, they went in and the commissioners voted for a moratorium on solar fields right there, just like that, because so many people showed up. In Boone County, we went to the commissioners meeting and requested a workshop. They granted it. 200 people showed up to Boone County Fairgrounds, and everyone spoke. And that next Monday, the commissioners got together and they voted for a 2-year moratorium on solar and wind. In Newton County, they've put restrictions on vehicles, the weight vehicles. Excuse me. So those big trucks that drill cannot drive on their roads. In Hendricks County, a group got together against wind farms, and they stopped a wind farm that was going to go in Jamestown. There's more examples. Oh, in Putnam County, we're planning a solar field, and I went down there and testified with them. In fact, in some of these meetings, folks, they'll just take when they know people are going to show up, they'll take public comment off the agenda. And 2 of these meetings I've been to, I've had to tell them that we're there and we want to talk, and they had to stay there and listen to us. But that is, so we need people that are willing to stand up to these people that are mismanaging this power and resources that we have given to them. Again, our elected officials that have failed us. Congressman Baird has voted for nearly every Ukraine spending package, and there has not been a war that he has not supported up to this point, despite his experience in Vietnam. It is because of those experiences that I had in combat in Afghanistan and the Philippines that I've taken a different approach to foreign policy and would seek peace instead of being purveyors of war all over the world, which we have been for about 100 years. And the last thing is all those things that I just spoke about, the medical tyranny, the increase. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to say this. During that medical tyranny, Congressman Baird co-sponsored the H.R. 550, which is a Democrat bill which gave the CDC $400 million to create the Immunization Infrastructure Act, which created software to track who is vaccinated and who is not. And he just recently is the primary sponsor of H.R. 4824, which is the Carbon Sequestration Collaboration Act, which brings that money. Now, that he did not vote for the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a big bulk of this green energy money. But as soon as it was passed, he sponsored a bill to go after that money to study carbon sequestration in the 4th Congressional District. And so those are the fights that we're fighting on the ground. The commissioners taking our time to do it because they're being brought in by our congressmen and our senators and our governors and our elected representatives as they go after all this federal money that they want. And they tell us that that's what we need to have so they can economically develop it. But it comes with strings attached. And that's the final issue, is the string attached. The biggest one is what we're all feeling right now, which is inflation. Everyone's property taxes are high. Costs, nominally, well, they're not nominal. The real inflation is double digits. We're talking about 25. I just spoke to a farmer who's from White County last night, and he said that his real costs are about 35% inflation over the last few years. So all of this comes with a cost. When they print on the definition of inflation, or inflation is a result of deficit spending. So if we're going $1 trillion in debt to fund wars all over, to fund these big agencies like the border agencies that aren't doing their job, then we are going to continue to pay for it. So I'm suggesting, and I'll wrap this up for my intro. I'm suggesting that not that we're rethinking this position, that we're getting this position of representative back to its original intent, which is to represent the people of the 4th District, be in the 4th District, be among the people of the 4th District, understanding their ideas, and taking that to Washington, D.C. Not having these legislators, not representatives, go out to Washington, D.C., relocate out there, and then start bringing Washington, D.C. to the district with all this money. So that's the difference that I'm offering, and that's my suggestion of why you should choose me or vote for me on May 7th in the primary. And not only do that, but you should take 10 of your friends with you and vote in the primary. Thank you. I probably won't even sit down. I don't think I need to sit down.
Oh, well, you can sit down. It's about time. You've been talking so much, Jim. I guess that thing. We did make a concerted effort to make sure that both candidates were here to get a fair shot. Jim Baird was at the White County Lincoln Day dinner last night. I made the trip from there to here, but he was unsuccessful in that trip today. So, he's tongue-tied. Anybody have any questions? I do. I'm going all the way in the back.
This community is no different than the other communities you talked about a while ago with solar and the green energy, the windmills and everything like that. Since we are live streaming this and everything of that nature, what would you say to the citizens of Carroll County about those two issues, or that one issue of green energy? What would you say about how you feel about it and what your stance is for that particular topic?
All right, thanks for the question. So I can answer two ways. I can tell you what their arguments are and how we've been effective in countering some of their arguments, or the action that we've taken that has been successful. The action really has only taken a small group of people, typically with one leader that's going to bring a group together, find out what meetings and when, like the planning meeting, the BZA, the area plan, the commissioners meetings, and then get the agenda, find out when public comment is, and come and bring this subject up. If it's on the agenda, that's one thing. If it's not, then you can just bring it up to the agenda and start finding out information about these projects that are maybe going on in your county. You're just not privy to it yet. This is how this has happened, is that no one knows about it except the commissioners or some planning people or some of the farmers that have gotten these contracts. But if one or a small group of people can get together and start that little group, you'll be tremendously effective just by going to these meetings and voicing your opinion and opposition. And you find out there's a project that's here and people really are, Mr. Seward, if they really don't want these projects in the area, then they'll all come to the local meeting. Everyone, you just have to tell all of your neighbors and all of your friends, and everyone will show up. And that is what's been most effective, taking action. Now, the two arguments are, and I just will try to be brief about it to give you a little ammunition, is one is, who's heard that Well, you can't tell a farmer or a property owner what they can do with their property, right? You can't do that. It's their property. You can't. Well, remember that private property starts with the fruits of our labor, which is our first dollar that they're taking away from us, giving to Washington, D.C., who then gives the money to these companies that then go purchase the land from farmers. An example is in Fountain County, Indiana. The company's name is Dolphin. That's the solar panel company. Well, if you go to their webpage, the first thing it says is we're a green energy company that is a federally subsidized company. These companies are shadow government companies. They're political insiders that know about these bills and this money and when it gets passed. And then they start a company and they buy Chinese solar panels and they start a business. And that's why these companies fail. At high rates, they fail. They go under or they get bought out, they get purchased because these companies aren't in it to provide a good service and a company, to provide a business or build a business. These companies are in it to get the federal money while it's available. And they're talking about it at every level, ladies and gentlemen. I was just listening to a podcast over here, and it was a mayor, it was a governor of one of the states. And they talk about it openly. Governor Holcomb talks about it. It is a lucrative industry. It is about economic development, bringing these projects to our communities. It is not about energy. It's not about, they talk about it's jobs, it's economic development. It brings things to the community. They're bundling in all these little packages. So getting back to it, so the tax argument is not a good argument. That's our money. That's the first dollar. And as soon as a business and a private individual brings our tax money into it, they're bringing us into the conversation. So that's why we go to the commissioners, and that's why we're getting involved, because they're using our money to do it. If they don't want our opinion, then they don't use our money, and then we can't be involved in that decision. And the second one is the tax base. They say that this increases the tax base, and that's why they do it. Well, just remember what they're talking. First of all, even at the local level, these governments are doing things that they were never intended to do. They're building things that they should be. They go after grant money, and they tell us it's a great thing to do, build a YMCA and all that. The private companies used to do all this, but they do it now with a lot of federal subsidies to come in these communities. So our local governments and our federal governments should not be doing a lot of things that they're doing. The second thing is like, as we just have never been a kind of people or community that thinks that giving our government more money through our taxpayer dollars is a good idea. We should be more wary of that when our community tells us that that's great that they just brought in $400 million. And remember that they promised these services, the roads, the fire, the police, to our grandparents and great-grandparents. So if they're failing, it's because they're being mismanaged. It's not because we need to increase more federal income to build these better, or build different economic development opportunities or projects, or pay for services that were already promised even a generation ago. Okay, these promises were made, taxes were paid, and services were not delivered. So we have to hold that accountable before we just start taking more of our money and putting it into the problem.
I actually have two questions. I'm a healthcare provider that worked during COVID, and I wholeheartedly support your perspective. But are you aware of the World Health Organization's pandemic preparedness program that they're now taking comments on?
I have heard that, yeah.
Literally change the way our country's sovereignty is.
Yeah, I think you're suggesting to the idea that they are going, that the United States will be, the WHO will be the final authority when it comes to healthcare policy.
If this passes.
Right, yeah, yes.
So you would not support that?
Yeah, so not only would I not support it, I've actually already spoken out against this. About a year and a half ago, the Senate had Senate Bill SB 4, at the Indiana General Assembly. And that bill, because it had money attached to it, the state government through federal grants went to all of our communities and said, we'll give you $3 million, $10 million, whatever, to do some ambulatory services or whatever. But it comes with strings attached, and we're in charge. So local health, your local, if Carroll County signed up for this, which they probably did, there were only a few that didn't, your local health authority no longer is the final authority here. The state has usurped that responsibility. They did it a year and a half ago in SB 4. So the reason I testified against it is because I just told you all what I was able to do at my Jimmy John's when the local health guy was right down the street and I delivered him sandwiches, which I did. He still frequents our place. But we can hold each other accountable. And there's things that he can't do. But now, if I were to do that, and this is why they passed that bill, is because they wanted, so they didn't want Charles Bookwalter telling them that I'm not going to mask my employees in the next pandemic, and they'll send a state agent to me, or they will shut down my business or make it so I can't pay taxes, or they have complete control over my business at the end of the day. The state does. So I testified against that because it's the same concept. Because the further we remove accountability for healthcare services, particularly public health services, the worse off we are. So they need to be as close, like everything else, as close to the local level as possible. So I would obviously never support anything like that. I think the WHO is a racket. I think most of these globalist agencies are rackets. NATO, we should have got out of NATO in 90. The UN, the United States has to rethink our foreign policy and the way, and I'm not the only, this isn't crazy. There's already a group of people out there right now that are working on these very things. It's just a small group. Again, I'm suggesting we send someone different there that'll work with them and try to advance some of this taking back our government, back to the people, back to the local level, and get out of some of these globalist organizations and bring people home, focus on the United States.
Question 2, China has bought a lot of farmland in our country. They continue to buy farmland. What is your stance on that?
That's frightening, but I think a lot of the times these scenarios, I don't know what the total number is. I'd have to look at the total number. I'm not sure. But it's a threat, and I don't like it. But I want to remind everyone that there is a greater threat going on at our State House and in Washington, D.C., that is a greater threat to our individual liberties, that is a greater threat to our land. Last year, they passed House Bill 1209, which means that if any of these carbon sequestration projects come in up there, that if 70% of the project, if 70% of the landowners agree, then they get to take the other 30% in eminent domain. Yeah, so this threat, and does anyone know what's going on in Boone County? The IEDC, the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, created a plan that they admittedly did because the 11,000 acres was only in the hands of 250 people. And so they went out there strategically, bought off some of these farmers, and are in the process of buying 11,000 acres of some of the most fertile farm ground in Indiana, right outside Boone County, because it was the last two governors' idea to have a corridor from Lebanon to Lafayette, between Purdue and Lebanon. And so they're essentially planning this. Folks, they are taking our land, they are taking our money, and it's our own government doing it. And this project that they're doing, the LEAP project, they're selling it to global companies. So they're taking our land and they're selling it to these global companies. In Pulaski County, right over there, the IEDC sold the area of the land the size of Manhattan is now a solar project, and Israel owns it. And it's right in your back. It's just right over there. It's the size of Manhattan. That's how big this is. I am sorry, I like that question because I think we need to talk more. This allows us to focus on what is more important, which is the 25-meter target. China's the 300-meter target. That's way out there. I honestly believe that we have a greater threat right now. And you guys that see it and you feel it right, that's why we have so many people running for office right now. And we all know it. We all know what's going on.
Okay, my question relates to the House of Representatives. And there's over 400 representatives there. You only hear about just a few of them that are taking leadership on issues. I've never heard Jim Baird's name, and I watch the news a lot. But Matt Gaetz, for example, you hear him a lot. He's a leader. He's influencing other representatives. And then you hear the concept of show votes, where they will vote conservative knowing that the bill will fail anyways, but they can show themselves to have voted for that bill. What's your comment about where you will stand, how you will be a leader in the House of Representatives? Conservative values.
Question. And I've not heard that term "show votes" before. Yeah. Matt Gaetz. So again, we're rethinking this position again. I've been asked that question before. What is my legislative agenda? Well, we have to look at this different. There's not a legislative agenda anymore to go there. It is going there to de-legislate. It is a de-legislative agenda, a defunding agenda to reduce the size of government and not go there with the intention of legislating or writing a bunch of legislation, right? So, and the reason I think that people like Matt Gaetz, because there's a few of them out there, they just have a different approach. We were talking about this the other day on the campaign. But it doesn't matter how they say, because I'm going to these events all over, and they're different candidates of different caliber, sometimes for the first time on the stage. And they may have a completely different presentation. It may not even be professional. But when we discuss it after the fact, people say, I really like that guy. I really like that person. But they wasn't the person, and it wasn't how they moved, and it wasn't what they looked like. It was what they said. It was the truth. And so when these guys like Matt Gaetz and the 20, the speaking, it doesn't matter how they say it. The reason that we like it, the reason that it's sweet to our lips is because it's the truth. They're speaking the truth. And so many of these issues that we're talking about is an assault on objective truths that we know is true, like gender fluidity, stuff like that. And so when they're coming out and talking about it, they're doing the thing that so many of them just won't even do, which is won't even talk about it because they don't want someone from the other side to attack them and call them a terrible name and use ad hominem attacks, which happens to me because I'll speak openly about these things. So that's the approach, that's the idea, is to go out there and actually join these men and women that are all like MTG that are already doing this, and join them instead of going there with an agenda or to have a legacy to write a piece of legislation. You go there to join those people that already have bills that are very important to us in our campaign, like defunding the Department of Education. Thomas Massey just got another co-sponsor on that bill. He makes a tweet about it every single time. So it's about going out and joining those people and actually trying to make some progress in defunding agencies and reducing the size of the government, which is what we all, I think, agree upon doing. Sure.
I'd like to piggyback on the question about the farmland. While China is probably the most aggressive buyer and leaser of lands in America at this time, it's actually the Communist Republic of Canada,
really?
Pardon me, that is the single largest of foreign entity that owns lands within the United States. But according to a 2021 USDA survey, approximately 2.2% of all Indiana farmland, 80% of which is valuable cropland, was owned or leased by a foreign entity. Last month, Governor Holcomb signed into law House Bill 1183, which bans 5 foreign adversary countries from owning or leasing farmland in the state of Indiana and banning them from buying any real estate of any kind within 10 miles of a military installation. This bill was clearly designed
to protect Indiana's valuable farmland, which is disappearing at a frightening rate, Hoosier food security, as well as the overall security of all Hoosier residents. If you were elected, or should I say when you were elected, would you be willing to sponsor a bill at the federal level designed to protect our nation's security, as well as our precious farmland and America's food security? Would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, that's it. Great. Yeah, thanks for all that information. Was that 80%?
80% of the
80% of Indiana?
80% of the, no, 80%, I'll read it again. Yeah. Approximately 2.2% of all Indiana farmland, it's roughly a 500,000 acres. It's like over 450,000 acres, is owned by foreign entities.
Yeah, okay.
80% of that amount is valuable cropland.
Gotcha, yeah. And I wonder how that land got into the hands of those entities as well. Because I doubt a foreign company can come in and buy the property without going through some kind of process.
They do it all the time.
Well, but I wonder if a private entity can come in, a foreign entity can come in and contact Keller Williams, or does a foreign entity come in and contact Governor Holcomb? And I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure. I shouldn't speak out of turn, but I'm not sure how that works to come in and buy large pieces of land if the foreign entity isn't like registering and making it known, or can they just come in and talk to your local real estate agent? Because that would be, yeah, I don't know how that works, but it is frightening, of course, that I would do that, but I don't know what that looks like. Because all I've seen my lifetime, what I continue to see, because I've talked to a lot of farmers around here, is the continued centralization of land into fewer and fewer people's, into fewer and fewer hands. So I don't know what that looks like, to do that, but I think we've got to encourage more small ownership, like the LEAP project. It sounds crazy, but they want to take 11,000 acres and develop it into globalists. These are huge globalist companies that are coming in here, build huge manufacturing and chips, but I would rather see 10,000 1-acre pieces of property that people have a small home on and a little bit of land, than if we're going to spend money that way. It's just insane that we wouldn't encourage something would be more land ownership and small farming or small gardening. Anyway, sir.
So why do you want to run? Just why? What's the passion? What's the motivation? What do you tell your wife that you're willing to jump into the swamp, fight the good fight? You join the Army, or you're part of it. There's a reason. I want to know why. What's going to be the motivation when hell breaks loose?
Why? Because I think we're at an inflection point right now. I really do. I think that we're at a point where there's so many things going on. Like, one of the biggest concerns would be like a dollar devaluation, or we lose the reserve status, or something like that could have serious civil effects here, or disruption and discord in the United States. And I think that is a very real possibility. And there have been so many attempts to get people together that would like-minded, that would come together and defend themselves. And we don't have that anymore. So there have been, in the last decade or so, little things called cells or little groups, and they don't work. Before that, the grandfather of those were militias, where people would come together and they would support one another. But those don't work because 8 out of 10 of them are FBI agents. But in reality, what this is a political movement of like-minded people that are taking their country back to the way it was originally intended. And because we don't, in my estimation, have that much more time. And we need some leaders that are out speaking about this, where we know who to rally around if the time ever comes, to have people in places that can keep control and protect our communities, frankly. That's why I'm doing this.
So our grid is extremely vulnerable. That's pretty common knowledge. What are your thoughts on protecting it?
That's a good question. Can I answer that before? Yeah. I like that because I talk about this a lot. Because we've been subsidizing oil and gas for 100 years. We've been subsidizing it. And that's upset a lot of people. Like, why are we doing that? And I agree. Why are we subsidizing these wealthy companies? But the fact is we have. And now our grid structure is crumbling. And what's the response of the federal government? What is it? What's the response? Go green. Go green. Can you believe it? They promised our grandparents, they promised us for a century that if they took our money and invested in this infrastructure, then your kids and your kids' kids are going to have efficient, inexpensive, available energy for a long time because we're investing in it now. And that's what they told our grandparents. And our grandparents believed them, and they let them take their money, and they did just that. They built an incredible infrastructure made out of oil and coal, which Indiana has in abundance. And instead of reinvesting in it, this is what I'm talking about, this mismanagement, the bungling of healthcare, borders, energy policy, everything, war. And this is an example of it. So if we were to do anything with federal money, then we should reinvest in the infrastructure that we already have and try to lower our energy prices. There's studies that show we have oil for like 350 years at rates that far exceed what we're using it now. And coal, and we've only become a cleaner environment. I've challenged the entire idea of climate catastrophe anyway. That's why we're even talking about this, because they're saying there's a climate catastrophe, which I don't agree with. Weather is warmed, weather changes, but it's not a catastrophe. In reality, the world suffers from cold deaths more than we suffer from heat deaths. It's a complete scam, and we need to reinvest in the infrastructure that we already have. Now, my first choice would be to let these companies decide in a free market, which everyone would go back to our fuel. We wouldn't have to subsidize them. The companies would build infrastructure and reinvest in it because they charge a fair value, and it would work. But they're not going to get their hands off of energy. So if we were going to do anything, we decrease our subsidies and we get out of green energy. We stop this nonsense, and we need more people to talk like this and about it. She's got to follow up.
That wasn't exactly.
Oh, sorry. All right.
Drill, baby, drill. I'm okay
Yeah.
with that.
Oh.
But EMP.
Oh, you're talking about that, about a catastrophic, protection. Okay. Well, again, you're just, and what are we on time?
7 minutes.
It's just another example. We were intended to have a strong defense. Okay, that was the mandate, to have a strong defense, not have 800 bases in 150 countries. You want to secure the United States. You want to secure our borders. You want to have fighting age men back here fighting the cultural war, which every major time we've had a war, a cultural war has followed, and we've lost, some of our culture. So we reduce the size of the military, we bring them back home, and we protect our borders, and we invest in our infrastructure. Once again, we invest in a defense, not in an offense. That's how I would approach foreign. I made it very clear that I would seek peace and seek to secure the borders and reduce our size and our intervention abroad. I was against the Ukraine tranches from the very beginning. I think we need to seriously reconsider all of the funding we do everywhere in the world, every single country, absolutely, and stop it, and bring it to a stop. Yeah, your question.
So my question is, I want to send good men, good leaders in our government. What are you going to do to prevent yourself from being purchased, bribed, and come home a lesser man, not one that we elected?
Yeah. I get that question all the time. It's really hard to answer because they've lied to us so many times. We've just been lied to again and again. I answered this question last night, actually, at the White county meeting. My response to them is, first of all, someone asked me today, are you a Christian? When we were door knocking, we left door knocking in Martinsville today. We were down door knocking in Martinsville and then drove up here for the town hall. But he asked if I was a Christian. I said, no, I follow Christ. And that's not just because we're in a church here. I think that's what governs my life and how I live. So I would take that with me and you can ask my team that I work with how I carry myself. I think that would be an example. And we would take that with us when we were in Washington, D.C. I've already committed to not living in Washington, D.C. I'm not going to live there. I'm coming home. I am going to stay. I am going to, as we not redefine it, but get back to the regional roots, have 3 or 4 offices throughout the entire district. Our focus is on the district. There are county parties that don't do anything. There are county parties that have precinct committeeman positions, 60% that no one runs for, they appoint them, and we have caucuses that elect representatives that we would never vote for. So this position of U.S. Rep is actually the leader of the Republican Party in the U.S. District 4, in Indiana House District 4, and I would treat it that way. I've made relationships with all the county parties and all the chairs. The focus is on bringing people into this party of like-minded people, taking our Republican Party back in Indiana. And so being focused on the district is also how you limit being exposed to that. You can't go out and live out there. You can't set your lifestyle out there. My kids are not going out there. We homeschool. We're keeping our lifestyle here. And you should enforce term limits on me every 2 years. So if it doesn't work out, you should absolutely primary me and term limit me by voting me out of office. It's a hard question to answer, but that's really how we would manage that. Yeah, I know it would be. We all know this is a spiritual battle. It would be constant pressure. But we also know that is the problem. There are people that are in Congress right now that just recently admitted that they are aware that their colleagues are compromised. They're compromised. That's what happens. And so to do this job effectively, you cannot become compromised. Yeah.
I have another question, and it's a two-place question, and it's a civic question. What's the role of the government? I want to hear from you. What's the role of the government? The biblical role, what does the Bible define the role of the government is? And then secondly, so make sure you answer that one clearly, is what's the constitutional role of the government? I want to hear what your philosophy is on those two things.
Well, I would, okay, so the role of a government is just the most powerful force that establishes dominance over a geographical area. So that's like a gang or government. A constitutional government, like we have, is a government that is in place to do very few things. It is to protect our God-given rights to life, liberty, and property. So those are positive rights, meaning you can't take them away, and you don't have to take from anyone else to give them to that person, right? They're positive rights. They're negative rights. They're negative rights, not positive rights. So that's the only role of the government, is to protect your life. Everything else we're supposed to work out on our own in our own communities. And they were constitutionally bound by that, and we have gone so far from that it's you can't even recognize what it is, with all the codes and statutes and regulations that were never intended to be. And it takes hard, strong people to be in those positions, to not continue to usurp responsibility from the people and centralize it into hands of a few people. Now, the biblical role of government. I haven't been asked that question. I got to think about it. There's a lot of answers you could probably go to, like giving unto Caesar. There's Old Testament government. Here's what I know. Here's how I answer that. The biblical role of government. I think it's in 1 Samuel 8. The sons are corrupt, right? Samuel's own sons are corrupt. And so the people say, we need a king. And Samuel goes to God like, it's not you, Samuel. It's not you. It's them. And God tells Samuel, that's fine, but go tell the people that a government is going to, conscript you. It's going to take all your wives and make them do this. It's going to take all your men and make you do this. It's going to take all your money. It's going to do that. So that's my answer. That's the biblical, my answer to a biblical role of government. There's probably a New Testament role, but I can't, on the top of my head, I can't think about what it is. Romans 13. Yeah, but that's really controversial. Romans 13, that's really controversial because...
I bet it isn't in here.
Yeah, all right, good, yeah. Everyone, that's what everyone said during COVID, was Romans 13. Sorry, yeah, that was a reference. That they can tell us what we have to just pray for, that we're put there by God and we're just supposed to pray for them, but that's debatable.
Wall builders, David Barton.
I've got, yeah.
Really good information.
I've read his book, Original Intent. So, and I've seen a lot of videos. And I've gone to that class, actually, wall builders class. Sir.
No, I appreciate your position on the foreign wars and support, but specifically, what's your position for U.S. support for Israel?
Specifically, well, I guess I could answer that personally and politically. People don't like that, but I support the country of Israel, but right now I would challenge their leadership. Right now, I do not support. I just was listening to a podcast up here about what Netanyahu is saying, that what we're supposed to give to them, and what's going on there. As any follower of Christ, is just like unbelievably devastating. It's the same in Ukraine. Just mass murder, mass slaughter on both sides. And these are Palestinian Christians, and these are Jews, and these are all kinds of people. They're human beings, made in God's likeness. So President Nixon, check, I think it was Netanyahu back then. I think it was him as well. In '67, when they tried to push into Egypt, because they started killing people and doing things where even the U.S. president said, whoa, you can't do this. And I think Reagan and Bush did the same thing when this is going on our entire lifetimes. And in my estimation, like most other interventions, more guns, more war, more missiles is not going to solve that. We've all seen that our whole lives was this two-state solution. I'm not sure that is a solution. I mean, that's all we've seen the entire time has been death and destruction. So I don't know what the answer is, but giving them $14 billion and materiel to kill people, kill each other is not the answer, in my estimation. Yeah. But I also don't object to them defending themselves. I mean, what happened October 7th was unbelievable. You defend believe me, I understand self-defense. Here I'll use an analogy, but it seems like to me that the relationship between Israel and the United States is like the playground, where Israel is the younger brother and America is the older brother, and Israel can do what it wants when it always knows the older brother is going to step in and stick up for them. But sometimes if the younger brother is forced to negotiate himself out of a position, then something better can come from that situation.
Mine's more of a comment than a question. Being an elected official, it's very difficult at times to stay strong and true to what you took the oath to uphold. And I want to thank you for doing that to this point, standing your ground on the poke. I know if I would have been fully in office at that point, I would have resigned my position before I would have ever agreed to any of that. We did not mask up in my office after that.
Good for you. Good for you.
Unless they came in and they chose to put it on because they were not feeling well. We do still have one little barrier up on our counter. We've taken everything else down. I've removed all the stipulations for the election process. I did that in 2022. If you're that afraid to get out, then stay home. But don't put your insecurities and think somehow I need to accept those just
that's
because
never
I'm
been done in
elected
history.
official.
That attitude has never been done in history before. That was the first time we experienced it.
Yeah, it's like I said, you know, it's a daily battle sometimes. So I appreciate you standing up for what you believe in and helping the rest of us out, to give us that voice too, and thinking and knowing that we're not alone, and I'm never gonna fall in and cave into that. I will resign before I ever do that and let the government tell me what is best for me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yep. And, you know, we've continued that too, like fighting against the IEDC. You know how tough a position that is? Do you guys know what the IEDC is? The Indiana Economic Development Corporation? Yeah. Like I'm sorry?
It's not elected officials.
They're not, no. It is a public-private partnership group between our government and private actors. And they're going to spend $2 billion in Indiana this year. And every year after, that's our money that they're taking. And they're planning how Indiana is going to look, because they don't think that we can do it among ourselves. And that's a tough position to take, to stand up to them and tell them that this is an age-old debate between free markets and socialism. And that is socialism, and it's in our backyards, and we have to point it out because they're powerful people, and they have a ton of money, and the general population can easily see, well, yeah, I mean, if they spend all this money, then yeah, there's going to be a job or it's going to be some economic development. But this is an age-old debate between how we develop our communities. Is it going to be through entrepreneurship and risk-taking and private capital and rivalry, or is it going to be through state actors, tax collection, and other means of using centralized planning to determine our communities? And it's a major threat going on right now in our communities.
Well, just to piggyback on what he said, these people making the determinations and rules are not elected. They don't have a dog in the fight, if you will. They didn't take an oath to uphold this, that, and the other. They're just someone that appointed them to say, okay, I think you can make the decisions on what is best for everyone else. And, I took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the state of Indiana, and that's what I'm going to do. And you coming in and telling me that I need to do X, Y, Z, or I'm not going to have a job, that's nuts.
Yeah. I agree with you, and I appreciate your boldness. Yeah. Sir, does anyone have a question for Congressman Baird?
You're looking very one-dimensional today, Congressman.
Regarding the whole green energy scam here in Indiana, one of the things that I haven't heard anybody talk about is all of these companies that are lining up at the troughs that are dipping their snout in the federal subsidies. Who owns these companies? I live in Frankfort in Clinton County, and by the way, it's worth going to Frankfort just to go to Jimmy John's. Not only are their sandwiches awesome, the service, you'll never get better service. I mean,
Thank
awesome.
You, Thank you very much, sir. Very kind of you to say.
If you head south on 75 here, you get into Clinton County, and before you get to Frankfort, you're going to see a big old solar field. That farm ground that's been taken out of production, I believe, my understanding is that it was leased. The farmers still own the ground, but all the solar panels and all the electricity that will be produced there is owned by what used to be Indianapolis Power and Light, which I can't remember how long ago it was purchased, and it's now AEG Indiana. Most people do not know that AEG Indiana is part of an international corporation called AEG Corporation, which is 16% owned by the Chinese. Now, that 16% isn't a big amount, but I kind of think that the Chinese swing a pretty big stick and have a lot more influence than just that 16% would indicate.
I bet
But-
that 16% is more than all of us put together.
Oh, yeah. But
Yeah, the pork producer,
Yeah.
yeah, Smithfield sold.
and China owns most of the pork production in the United States. But, yeah.
Was there a question? I don't even know. Yeah, it was.
Don't be fooled with what she said a minute ago. Don't be fooled that appointed boards are in the federal government or the state government alone. We have several appointed boards in Carroll County. Redevelopment Commission, after Redevelopment Commission, and a lot of other stuff too. They get millions and millions and millions of dollars. They spend it without any accountability. They are placed there by the county council. They are placed there by the commissioners. And I'm not dogging either one of those groups. I'm just telling you it's a fact. And they are wielding a big stick without any accountability. You're not going to see them on this year's ballot. They are not elected. So it's a local thing. It's a local problem as well as it is anything else.
Well, again, we got to remember those organizations started as consulting organizations, Indiana Economic Development and your local economic development corporation didn't have big budgets. They were out there, encouraging people to move to the communities because of our culture, our community, our low taxes, our low crime rates, encouraging high water tables in Frankfurt. They can give 1 million gallons a day, I think, on the industrial park over there to people, some people, so they can offer those kinds of things. But that's not what it is anymore. Now they take an incredible amount of money and they purchase land and they buy land. And so I'm not a Luddite, and I'm not against economic development. I just would rather see us by having more of our resources develop more, and not give our resources to a central authority and let them do it. And think about that, they spend $2 billion a year. If we had that money back, they wouldn't need our property taxes to be so high. They wouldn't need our income tax to be so high, and we would have that money back, and we wouldn't fund the IEDC. We could have that money. We could have that money back, and then you can consider what that would be like if we all had that much money back in our pocket. Sir.
We have a question from Facebook here, Charles. The question is, how would you address the issues at the border?
Just to remind everybody that the border, again, we've been dealing with this our entire lifetime. We have $1 trillion, I think, at this point, Border Patrol, and the amount of money we spend on the border is out of this world, how much money we spend on the border. And it's never been worse. The last 2 years, we've let more people in the border that are undocumented than in the history. And I believe it's the highest 2 years ever. Despite how much we invest in the security and all the infrastructure for them to manage this problem. So it's obvious, or should be obvious to many of us, that this is just a political football that they throw back and forth. So in my estimation, and as we've seen recently with Texas and a few other states taking more authority upon themselves to deal with this issue, that's clearly what we should do, is give these resources and autonomy to the border states. Now, we're all nearly border states now, but to allow them to address these issues right on their own border. And they can make quick decisions. They already know how to do this. They're already doing a lot of it. And the federal government has proven incompetent or whatever. They've just proven that that's how government works, that we never get the issue solved. So I also, again, think this all kind of ties into securing our own border through reducing our interventionism abroad, returning a lot of soldiers back to the homes and communities, and working in defending our own borders. Yeah.
So in talking about some of these committees that are appointed and don't have any oversight, is there a way to get rid of or reduce some of that?
Well, at the federal level, if you're talking about it, here at the local level, I mean, that's just people probably showing up. At the federal level, that's what so much of this problem is again, Congress returning to the original intents of what the function of the most powerful thing that Congress can do is not fund these agencies. And when you don't fund the agency, you're defunding the administrative agency. These laws that get passed are 7,000 pages. They're skeleton laws that the administrative agency then goes and fills out and fills all this stuff in. It didn't always used to be that way, and in fact, that's a recent phenomenon, as opposed to passing smaller bills, single appropriation. They've already started working on this. They just need more people. That was one of the things that Matt Gaetz got, one of the first holdouts, is they got single line appropriation for some of their appropriation bills. So you have to go on record as whether you're going to fund this specific line item to be able to hold each other accountable. But the responsibility of Congress was to control the purse strings, and that's their opportunity to stop an overzealous executive or judicial or whatever. And so this is how we would have to look at this. That's why I'm saying we need to defund some of these agencies, like the Department of Education. It's only 43 years old. It's not that long ago we didn't have it. It was very contentious when it passed. You know, I'm not saying defund education. I'm saying return the money back to the people, back to the states, local levels, and not have a $1 trillion bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. It's not effective. It's ineffective. It comes with strings attached, curriculum that we don't agree with. It's when we have to start looking at this position in that way, in my estimation.
We have another Facebook question. It's addressing kind of the issue you just touched on. I think there are government agencies that are overstepping their responsibilities. Are there any that you think we could shrink or get rid of entirely?
Yeah, we've done and defund the ATF, and these ones that I'm bringing up are already sponsored bills that have already been sponsored by Chip Roy, by Thomas Massey, by Matt Gaetz. One of them is to defund the ATF. And when you defund these agencies, there are going to be a few responsibilities that might have been one of the original intentions of the agency. You just take that responsibility off and you put it in another agency. The ATF has been all kinds of different agencies. It's been part of the FBI. It's been moved around under Homeland Security and back and forth. It's been moved all around. So you get rid of the agency, you take a few of the responsibilities and put it in like to U.S. Marshals or some other federal agency, and you're just getting rid of a lot of the laws and regulations that these federal agencies have and they were never intended to have in the first place. ATF, an example, Department of Education, Department of Energy, because look what we're getting with the Department of Energy, what we're getting in our own backyards. They can't be trusted with this kind of money. Those are three that we've talked about and we put on our platform, on our website. Defunding those agencies. The Department of Education, ATF, microphone up front, please, and Department of Energy. And I'm sure I'll think of more. I mean, FBI. I'll stop too. I'll stop.
Okay, so
Do I need to open my Bible app?
No, you don't need to do that. But here's the deal, Charles. We want to support you. But we have been in the electing officials, and we've seen it nationally over the last 5-10 years, people who come to the stage and they say really good stuff. Dan Crenshaw. Crenshaw's one of them. Yep. There's a number of them. And my wife and I are done. You know, I was in D.C. last Tuesday. I saw Jim Beard. It's a behemoth. Mm-hmm. It's a massive mess, and I told his constituent or his aides, he's a deadbeat in D.C. He needs to leave. But neither am I willing to elect you if I'm not confident that you're going to be a man of integrity and not become the next deadbeat or the next sellout. George Washington had the opportunity to become president of the United States.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
King of the United States, excuse me. King. And he walked away from it. He wanted to go home. How do we know? And I guess we're sitting here. I appreciate these are talking points. You're talking about talking points. You can change your talking points. How do we know that you're the man that's going to represent us if we send you to D.C.? You're not going to change.
Things. Thanks for the question. I'll tell you two things.
Charles, can I answer that question for you?
If you want, I guess.
Let
me explain
I'll
something.
try to remember my answers
Okay,
because
keep
I
that
got
in your
two in my head.
Folks, my name is Tim Kramer. I handled the media and every commercial that you saw from 2010 to 2020 for the Republican Party of the state of Indiana, my company did. That's what we're responsible for. Been on hundreds of campaigns. This man right here, the reason I'm standing up and joining him and volunteering my time is because I'm disgusted by what I saw during that decade of working with the Republican Party in the state of Indiana. He has more integrity, he has more common sense, he has more of a backbone than any of the men and women that I met there. We saw the other night with Sharon Nagel. My experience, I'm not speaking for Charles, Sharon Nagel showed up. But when they asked her the tough questions, she refused to answer. Every time he's been asked a tough question, he'll do one of two things. I don't know, or here's my answer. If I don't know, I'll learn more about it and I'll get back with you. He spends until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, going through the process, not to win, but to represent the people. That is rare these days. Secondly, he wins, I'm going to D.C. with him. I'm going to hold him accountable because I'm a constituent as well. I'm not just a representative. I'm not there to work for him. I'm a constituent. So that's why I say, and Charles, I hated to jump in there, but this question, for you guys, you don't know him. Tonight's the first night you met him. I've been with him for nearly a year, right? I've seen his family. I've seen how one last thing I'll say about this campaign. I have worked with everybody from Mitch Daniels to Eric Holcomb to Mike Pence. We worked with them all. This campaign and his leadership, there's no infighting, there's no grumbling. Everybody has their position and does their work. It's one of the, I told him last night, this has been my favorite campaign of all time. There's no stress, no drama. It's just get the work done. And time again, we've had problems. He and I went to Iowa to caucus for Trump. And we get out there, and what ends up happening? The truck breaks down. Did that stop us from getting the job done? No, the mission changed, and we moved forward, and we found solutions to be able to do what needed to be done. That's why I'm supporting Charles Bookwalter, and I hope you do too.
That is very kind. My career in the military, I was about 10 years at the mark when you get out of the military. At 10 years, you're like, I might stay, do 10 more years. I was a Green Beret. I was promoted ahead of my peers. I was Ranger qualified, so I had a triple canopy. I had a dive bubble, a Bronze Star, and awards that took 2 pages on my DD-214. That when I went to out process, every person I talked to, they look at, and then they look up and they're like, "You're getting out? Why would you ever get out of the military?" Because I never intended to make the military a career. And it wasn't about staying there and doing something just because I got awards and promotions. The second thing I'll tell you is this, and there's people in this room that might be a part of this, but Carroll County hasn't maybe gotten as much love. The biggest part of our campaign has been to do what Green Berets do all over the world, which is recruit, train, and fight alongside your allies. The biggest part of our campaign, the reason that we've knocked on 25,000 doors, the reason that we've outraised Jim Baird the last 2 quarters is because we have like 100 people working for us all over the 4th Congressional District. We have recruited all these people in and are working on the ground with all their people. We were knocking on doors in Martinsville. There was a crew in Crawfordsville. There's a crew in Boone County. There's a crew in Hendricks County. They were in Plainfield today. And there's a crew in Tippecanoe County that walks every single Saturday and in the evenings. We've knocked on 25,000 doors. It's a different campaign. I've never done this before. It's a different way of looking at politics and, and having our communities and keeping our communities together. No one has ever taken this approach to build a network of people that are becoming precinct committeemen and delegates so they can actually reflect. They're actually running for these offices instead of being appointed and then caucusing them in. They're going, and then they're walking with our documentation. So I did a few training programs. That's what we do. We recruit, then we train them. I've offered precinct committeeman courses and constitution courses. And then we walk alongside them by carrying their literature, which I've done the last 3 years to help get people elected in Boone County. And now they're all out carrying literature for me. So as I run for precinct committeeman, I'm running for precinct committeeman. So I would make you aware of all the things happening in the Republican. You're a Republican primary voter. Oh, and here's a candidate that's running for you in Congress today. I also need your vote as precinct committeeman. Thanks for your time. And door knocking on that. So I tell you that to tell you because my dad is not a congressman. You know, I don't come from money. It's a completely different approach to this office and how to get elected in this office. I've never run for anything smaller. People tell me that first object, why don't you just run for county commissioner? Like, what? You're complaining about what's going on and then you're asking me to do it the way they do it. We're not going to do it this way. We're going to go for the top of this position and we're going to take it. No one owns me. If we win this, it's by the will of God. I've had only a few people endorse, small names to endorse this. The House Freedom Caucus called me and gave me an interview and they never really endorsed me. That's because if we win this, it's because we have no one else to give thanks to. No one has come out and supported us except the people. And we have hundreds of volunteers. We've outraised the incumbent 2 quarters in a row. And last quarter, the incumbent had to pull out an additional $200,000 and loaned his campaign $200,000. That's how serious our campaign is right now. And I need you to take 10 of your friends and vote in the primary. Sir?
Normally, one of the questions I ask is, do you support the Second Amendment? But actually right now, tonight, I have something that weighs a little heavier on my mind. In just the past week or two, the Biden administration has literally gutted Title IX, a law that was passed by our Congress, and they have literally administratively gone in and gutted it. And now men who identify as women are now going to be able to be granted all the rights and all the protections that were initially indicated under Title IX to protect women in sports and business. Yeah. And I mean, if
upside down world.
This is just, how can they do that administratively?
It's an assault on objective truths.
Yes.
You might find this interesting.
Will you fight for that when you go back?
Yeah, and I'll tell you exactly how we're already working on this a little bit. But again, an example of an assault on objective truths. It's not true. So you'll find this interesting because we're a candidate. We go to the Lincoln Day dinners that occur, and last night was a Lincoln Day dinner in White County. And White County has the best Lincoln Day dinner in the 4th District, probably 400 people there. And Riley Gaines happened to be the speaker there. And she gave a presentation on what she went through swimming against Leah Thompson. But also, you know, I remember I have 3 daughters, so it's pretty important to me. But in Lebanon, Indiana, in Boone County, about 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, or 4 to 6, the campaign, the dates go by so fast. But there was a young lady in middle school that had to change in a locker room with a male student. In Lebanon, in Boone County, a male student they approved him to start changing in the middle school girls' locker room. So she went home and asked her mother, they have to do something. All the girls were upset. And the mother said, okay, I'll go talk to the school board. And the daughter, Delilah, said, maybe I should go talk to the school board. So she ended up doing it and in front of the school board, and it went viral, and Riley Gaines retweeted it, and it's got like 1 million views. So we invited this young girl and her mother and father to come up to the White County dinner. So they sat at our table last night, and that young girl, Delilah, Marshall is her name, she was able to meet Riley and get her signature and all that. So it was a special event for both of them last night. So it's kind of ironic that you asked him that. And I was able to talk to Riley a little bit, and told her certainly if I was to win, I would work her. She's testified in front of the House and Senate multiple times. So whatever she's working on, I would help. It was pretty incredible watching her last night. She was very competent, and she's only 24 years old.
I would also bring to your attention that those of us in healthcare, I work in psychiatry, I've worked in primary care for 20 years. I am confronted with this on a daily basis. Those of us who think there are two sexes also need protection.
Isn't that crazy? That is an assault on truth. Well, folks, it's 7:30. How we doing? We're good? Well, we'll wrap up here then. Thank you. Did anyone have any more questions? Any other questions? Yeah, I'm asking you to seriously consider my candidacy on May 7th.
Thank you for watching the Charles Bookwalter Digital Town Hall. For more information about Charles Bookwalter and the Bookwalter for Congress campaign, visit bookwalterforcongress.com.